I wasn't invited to my father's birthday. I mean, not officially. The invitation went out to everyone. My brother, my cousins, even Mr. Arnaldo, the neighbor who always borrowed our lawnmower. I only found out about the party later, through the pictures that circulated around. Long wooden tables hung under tiny lights, plates full of roasted ribs, a tradition our family always made sure to keep alive. On the porch, a huge commemorative banner. Between my father's name and my brother's wide smile, there was an empty space where my name should have been. Instead, a small banner read, "Following their own path." No title, no record. I stood on the other side of the street, my hands shoved deep into the pockets of my worn-out jacket. The cold spring wind cut through my skin, and the laughter from the party buzzed like a distant memory. It was there, on that cracked sidewalk, that I realized. I'm Ruth Presley, 30 years old, and I'm the daughter who chose to walk different paths, even knowing it would cost me distance. The daughter who, at some point along the way, stopped being remembered in the celebrations. Through the lit windows I saw my family toasting. To victory, to tradition, to those who kept the surname alive. Glasses raised, laughter thrown to the wind. And my mother, in the same green dress she reserved for special nights, floated among the guests, like a ghost of a past that no longer included me. I didn't knock on the door. I didn't wave. I stayed there like an old piece of furniture, out of place, useless. A memory flooded me. 8 years old, in the same backyard, holding my father's hand. He lifted me onto his shoulders so I could see the fireworks bursting beyond the trees. That child believed love would always be easy. The porch light flickered. Someone pointed in my direction. And then my brother crossed the lawn, walking toward me. He didn't shout. He didn't raise his voice. He just slowly shook his head, heavy, as if ashamed of both of us. "You don't fit in here anymore, Ruth," he said, his voice low without anger. "Not now." I forced a smile, small, tight, and turned on my heels, the gravel crunching under my boots. They thought that losing my job was the same as losing who I am. But they were wrong. 3 years ago everything was different. Back then I was a source of pride. The first in the family to cross the university gates. The kid who left our small town with more than a wrench and a handful of hopes. They even threw a barbecue when I got that job at a tech startup downtown. They patted me on the back like I had won some invisible marathon. I can still see my father there by the barbecue, a beer in his hand and a smile full of pride, announcing to anyone who would listen. "That's my girl, Ruth. She's going far, you'll see." And for a while I believed it too. I worked endless hours, put vacations off, drove out at 2 a.m. just to make it in time for Sunday breakfast with them. I sent postcards from every new city I visited, small gestures to keep the ties stretched but alive. I believed the effort would be enough. That distance would never erode love. But distance didn't come suddenly. It crept in like rust, hidden in the hinges, until one day everything collapsed. At first they complained about my spaced-out calls with a tone that tried to be light. Then the family group messages started to thin out. My name, which once shone in the conversations, kept sinking until it disappeared. Invitations to birthdays, to Christmas dinners stopped coming. Somehow I let the excuses pile up. They disappeared like dry leaves in the wind. Too much work, too far, too much going on. When our startup was swallowed by a giant in the industry and I ended up among the many let go, I realized there was no one I could really call to tell. When I finally gathered the courage to seek some support, the responses came cold and automatic. "Oh, I'm sorry. I hope you recover soon. Maybe it's a sign to go back home and get your life on track." The warmth that used to run freely between us family friends had turned into something cold, mechanical, almost out of obligation. 5 months before my father's birthday party, while I was tidying up my small apartment, I found an old shoebox hidden in the closet. Among yellowed Polaroid photos and old concert tickets I found a letter. Thick paper, slightly stained by the pressure of a heavy hand. It was from Mr. Johnson, the CEO of one of our biggest clients. He had written the letter after a complicated product launch, thanking me for my calm in the midst of chaos, for my firmness while others faltered. "You have a strength that is rare to find," he wrote. "Don't let this world diminish who you are." I sat there for a long time with the letter open in my hand, feeling the words pulse in my chest like a faint but steady heartbeat. At that time I believed that loyalty and effort were enough. That working hard, loving right would be enough to hold everything together. I carefully folded the letter, smoothing out every crease, and put it back in the box. Some things I was starting to understand, things were never really ours to hold. That night something inside me changed forever. On the night of the birthday party, I simply couldn't sleep. The images kept flashing behind my eyelids. The clinking of glasses, toasts, the way my brother, Levi's face hardened when he asked me to leave. The cutting silence when my father turned his back without even giving me a glance. Around 2 in the morning, not knowing what to do with myself, I found myself scrolling through social media automatically, just to avoid confronting my own thoughts. That's when I saw it. A photo posted by my cousin Mariana. The party. Everyone was there, under the lights hanging in the backyard. Hugging, smiling widely at the camera, my father, my brother, my mother, cousins, neighbors. Above the image, the caption read, "Family stronger than ever." Below, a string of comments I should have ignored. Someone casually asked, "Hey, where's Ruthie these days?" Mariana replied too quickly, "Oh, didn't you know? She was fired last year. Some pretty complicated stuff at her old job. Kind of embarrassed the family. Better not to talk about it." I stared at those words, waiting, hoping that the screen would shuffle everything, that it was a mistake, an illusion. But no. The words stayed sharp. Unyielding. Complicated stories. Embarrassment for the family. It wasn't just a simple misunderstanding. It wasn't distance or life pulling each of us in different directions as sometimes happens. It was a choice. Deliberate. A rewriting of my story so they could preserve the perfect image they needed to display. I sat there in the pale light leaking from the screen, looking at the empty apartment, the worn furniture, the peeling walls. And for the first time I truly felt the weight of everything I had sacrificed. Every missed holiday. Every birthday I wasn't there. Every call I put off. And in the end, all that was left was silence. Driving aimlessly, every missed call echoing in my head, reminding me of every time I needed them and they weren't there. Outside, the midnight wind lightly tapped against the windows, whispering through the cracks. And then, without meaning to, I thought of Mr. Johnson's letter. Still kept in the shoebox, crumpled at the back of the closet. A man who had known me for only a few months had seen more value in me than the people I had shared an entire life with. The anger that came was not loud nor desperate. It was cold. Precise. Like the sharp point of a blade drawn slowly and deliberately. They had made the choice. To erase me, to shame me for my absence. Fine. If they wanted a story to tell, I would give them one, but it wouldn't be the version they had chosen to write. It didn't take long for the real reason to come to light. A few days after the party, I received a call from Mrs. Anderson, the old neighbor who always gave me an extra pack of cookies when I was little. She hesitated a bit at first, asking how I was, talking about the weather, saying she missed me at the event. But then her voice faltered. "It's just that. They didn't want complications, dear," she murmured with pity. "You know, with your father's award and all." I straightened up in my chair, feeling my heart thud against my ribs as I listened. Mrs. Selina Anderson unknowingly kept talking, each word cutting deeper. The town hall was going to honor my father at the next edition of the Civic Legacy Award, a public recognition, celebrating his trajectory, the building of a family seen as an example, a pillar of the community. It was the perfect opportunity. Photos, speeches, a carefully edited story. And I, the unemployed daughter, the unwanted stain, was a blur that no longer fit in the picture. They couldn't afford to display a crack in the perfect frame they were assembling. I thanked Mrs. Selina for the call and hung up the phone, my eyes lingering on the old broken window in the kitchen, where the sunset tinged the sky with rust-colored hues, like a long-forgotten scar reopened forcefully. It wasn't about love. It wasn't about misunderstandings. It was about image. About keeping the illusion intact. About ensuring that the family's brand remained shining, even if, for that, they had to cut out any piece that threatened the ideal painting. I thought of Levi's rigid smile, my mother's evasive gaze, my father's heavy silence as I walked away that night. All so fragile, hanging by a thin varnish of desperate pride, a varnish that wouldn't withstand even the slightest touch of imperfection. A different kind of anger was born in me then. Not an impetuous explosion, but something cold. Hard. Silent and precise, like a blade sinking deep. They had traded blood for applause, loyalty for legacy. Fine. I would let them keep all of it. I wouldn't fight for the crumbs that fell from their table. I no longer belonged to this theater. I would build something of my own. No fanfare, no need for immediate recognition. Like everything real in life, it would come slowly but solid. About a week after Mrs. Selina's call, I was sitting in the same kitchen, flipping through job listings, listless, offers that seemed more like handouts than real opportunities. That's when the phone vibrated. An unknown number. For a second I almost let it ring until it went to voicemail. But something in me, maybe stubbornness, maybe the tiny spark of hope, made me answer. "Ruth Presley?" said a rough voice on the other end. "It's Austin Johnson." I straightened up in my chair, the name triggering immediate recognition. Mr. Johnson, former CEO of Veritas Technologies. The man who, back then, had the kindness to send me a handwritten letter. It was another time when people still recognized those who stayed steady in the chaos. "I heard about the restructuring at your old company," he continued. "Word spreads fast. What a shame, good people being discarded over a spreadsheet, right?" I didn't know how to respond. I stayed quiet, letting the silence fill the space. "I'm creating something new," he said. "Market Point Industries. Smaller, more agile this time. No politics, no corporate mess where we scale just to avoid sinking. We need someone strong, someone who knows how to stay steady in the storms without sinking along with them." I leaned back in my chair, the weight of the conversation hitting me slowly. "I remember you," Mr. Johnson said simply. "How you handled the chaos. That mess, the things no one wanted to touch. You didn't panic. You didn't make a scene. You just did the work." There was a pause and then a low, satisfied laugh. "I'll send the offer details, but if you're in, I'd like to keep it quiet until our formal launch next month. I want to make some noise at the right time." When the call ended, I sat there for a long time, looking at the pale afternoon light stretching across the kitchen counter, which already seemed on the verge of collapse. No applause. No congratulations. Just a deep stillness which settled into me, solid and definitive. I wouldn't fight for a place in the perfect story they had built. I wouldn't care about being invited back to the spaces where the doors were already locked. I would wait. I would build. And when the time came, it would be my turn to shine, silently. The time came when I would no longer ask for permission. I would simply. The Civic Legacy Award Gala was held at the Marlowe Grand Convention Center. The kind of place where the carpet always exuded a faint smell of coffee and dust, no matter how many times they tried to clean it. Banners with old photos of my father hung from the beams, him smiling stiffly in black and white, always next to the achievements he was so proud to show, milestones he wore like medals. Length of service, the plaque read, engraved in heavy golden letters. I arrived early, slipping through the crowd in a dark suit that no one recognized. I wasn't on the guest list, but no one questioned a man in a tie carrying a clipboard, moving as if he had already been part of that world. From a more distant point, I observed everything. Levi was the first to grab the microphone. He smiled. My mother wiped her eyes with a hint of pleasure. Except for one detail. They didn't mention me once. Not during the opening video where old family photos gleamed on the screen. It was almost impressive, the precision of my erasure, as if they had rehearsed and polished every detail until it became irrefutable. Around me, people clapped and murmured approval, raising glasses and toasting. I stayed perfectly still without making a sound. I didn't need to. I just needed to wait. The truth I learned was that I didn't need the spotlight. Just the right moment. And that moment came when the room fell silent, and the MC, with a smile so wide it almost seemed painful, tapped the microphone. "And now," he said, "we would like to recognize a very special guest tonight. Please join me in welcoming the newly appointed CEO of Morgan & Hart Industries, Ruth Presley." For a second the silence was absolute. Frozen. Glasses half raised, wide eyes blinking. Then the heads turned almost as one, looking for me. I stepped forward from the shadows. There was no fanfare, no rush, just silent steps on the aged carpet, the soft touch of my shoes filling the void with their applause. I had forgotten how comforting that could be. On stage the light hit me squarely, warm and heavy. I saw my father shift in his seat, a look of confusion crossing his face as if in shock. Levi's smile, my brother, cracked at the edges, a fissure that he couldn't hide. My mother there, gripped a napkin a little too tightly, the fabric clenched in her trembling hands, twisting it. First I adjusted the microphone with a slow and deliberate hand. "Good evening," I said, my voice firm, easily crossing through the stunned crowd. "It's an honor to be here tonight, surrounded by so many familiar faces." There was a ripple in the audience, a cough, a chair moving, and then silence. I didn't need to look directly at my family. I didn't need to. Their silence cut through the room louder than any scream. I spoke briefly, calmly, about the mission of Morgan Hart Industries, building something new, something real, something that would be valued for integrity, not just as a word on a plaque but as a way of life. No vengeance, no accusations, just the truth that echoed through every word. When I finished, the applause came. Delayed, polite, uncertain. Some clapped out of habit, others out of confusion, and some from genuine surprise. It didn't matter. I wasn't there for the applause. I was there for them to see. The sun they tried to extinguish not only survived but rose higher, stronger than they had ever dared imagine. I left. The stage was behind me. The moment didn't need to be grand, it didn't need exaltation. It was already enough. I didn't stay for the other speeches. Instead, I left the stage, crossing through groups of guests, offering polite nods and brief smiles, shaking hands with strangers whose names I would probably never remember. The words traveled faster than my steps. Whispers slithered through the room like smoke. "That's Ruth Presley, the CEO," I heard one comment. "I thought she had left," whispered another. I approached the buffet table, under a chandelier dimmed by the weight of the years. A small crowd gathered around me. A man whom I vaguely recognized from some church picnics stepped forward. "Congratulations," he said, his voice a little too loud, as if trying to make himself heard. "Looks like things worked out for you after all." I let the words settle between us before responding. "They always do," I replied, offering a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Another woman joined the conversation, an old acquaintance of my mother, one of the bridge partners. She looked toward the table where my parents sat, rigid, hands crossed on the table, their faces pale. "Your family must be so proud," she commented. I slowly turned, letting my gaze wander across the room, over the people who once celebrated every achievement of mine, and then erased my footsteps without hesitation. "My family," I said, my voice firm. "They taught me something very important." The chairs creaked, glasses froze in the air. The silence that followed was thick, heavy. "They taught me that belonging isn't something given. It's something built, brick by brick. And loyalty isn't something inherited. It's something proven every day, in the little things, in the moments when no one is watching." The silence settled, heavy and relentless. Over the crowd, I didn't need to say anything else. I didn't need to name names, recall betrayals, or forgotten conversations. They knew. Everyone knew. I simply thanked each person, each man and woman within my reach, and gave a farewell wave. The truth had been spoken, not as an accusation but with a silent certainty. Sometimes the cleanest cuts are the ones that leave no marks. And that night I left without looking back. The air was fresh and the stars shone sharp against the dark, deep sky. For the first time in a long time I felt my chest light. Behind me the gala continued, muffled, like a distant memory. Laughter spread in soft waves, applause, uncertain, cracked hesitantly, and the heavy doors closed with a sigh, as I crossed the threshold into something wider, quieter and freer. In the parking lot, the cars gleamed under the streetlights, perfect rows of polished ambition. I walked past them without hurry, my reflection sliding across the shiny surfaces like a ghost they couldn't erase. I stopped at the edge of the lot just for a moment. From here I could still see the imposing, flamboyant building against the night, trying to maintain its perfect facade. I let my gaze soften, letting it pull away, becoming something small. I didn't hate them. It was the last surprise, one I didn't even know I would feel. I didn't pity them. I just let go. I spent years trying to fit into spaces that restricted me, trying to earn the pride of people who only valued the reflection that flattered them. Now I had my own space, my own sky, my own story. I shoved my fingers into my pocket and touched Mr. Johnson's old letter, the one I carried with me throughout the night like a silence. "You have a rare firmness," I read, smiling. I tucked the letter deeper into my jacket and turned toward the open road. No fireworks, no grand farewells. Just the end of a new path.